Singleton from Sumter County today to talk to us about Florida-friendly landscaping. Welcome, Lloyd.
Thank you.
What is Florida-friendly landscaping?
Well, it's basically methods of sustainable landscape maintenance in combination with low-maintenance plants that will allow you to have a beautiful landscape and save time, money, energy, and also protect our future and our environment. It's pretty good principles.
That sounds pretty nice. Now, we're going to talk about just the first one today.
Yes, there's 9 principles, and the first one we want to talk about is right plant, right place.
What do you mean by right plant, right place?
It's kind of cool alliteration there, isn't it? Yes. Basically, noting your planting conditions. You want to pay attention to your soil, to the amount of sunlight, and also the water conditions of any particular spot in your landscape before you go shopping or deciding what kind of plant to put in.
Is there that much difference around a house?
Oh, absolutely. You'll even have different microclimates. You'll have different climatic conditions protected from a north wind on the south side of the house or something, for instance, might be an area you could get by with something a bit more tropical.
Oh, wow.
And then you also have areas that are lower and may retain more water. There's lots of different variations in your yard, and you need to take all those things into consideration before deciding what to plant.
Now, if we start at the bottom, the soil, what do we need to consider about the soil?
Well, first off, noting the type of soil, and you can even get a soil test. You may want to bring a soil sample into the local extension office and have it tested for pH and some of the nutrient availability of that soil. But you also want to take a note of what kind of soil it is. If it's a very large grained sand, it's going to be very well drained. It's not going to hold a lot of water. However, in some areas in our counties, we do have some clay soils, and those are going to hold a little bit more water, and therefore that might be an appropriate spot for something that likes water more.
There's also a lot of issues around very close to the house where there's maybe building debris or a high pH from the concrete.
Absolutely. Anytime that construction debris is buried, you're going to have much more alkaline soils there, and there are some plants that will tolerate that more so than others. It's important to pick the right one, or you excavate the entire area and try to get all the debris out, which is a big undertaking.
But you should be sampling your soil in each of the different areas that it's a little different.
Yes.
You bring in a sample, not just mix it all up.
Particularly if you're redoing your entire landscape, you would want to do that. If you're just focused on one area, you may want to sample that area alone.
It may be better just to do one side of the house at a time.
There you go.
So what about light now?
Light's critical because some plants, particularly fruiting plants and a lot of flowering plants, require full sun. They want full sun all day, every day. A lot of other plants, particularly the leafy ones, may really want more shade. They're going to thrive, they're going to be darker green if they're planted in the shade of a house or shade of a tree. When you take that into consideration, you're really making your plant be more healthy by giving it the location you like. Some of us like to be indoors more than outdoors, and same with plants. They like to be protected or not.
Yeah, some get sunburned. How much time is considered full sun versus shade? I mean, is it the length of the sun, or is it actually the amount of sunlight like coming through a canopy or being blocked off by a house?
It's really kind of the percent of light that's getting through the canopy of a tree. That's going to protect it a lot and be considered partial shade. If you have very dense canopy, or it's on a side of the house that never gets direct sun.
North side of the house,
yes,
might not ever get any direct sun?
Correct. The north side would get very little direct sun right up next to the house because the sun is typically in the southern hemisphere all winter. So you do need to note that when you're selecting the plant.
Okay, what about water?
Okay. A lot of times our irrigation systems are zoned, and you may have a zone that is designed for the turf area, hopefully, and then another zone that's designed for trees and shrubs. Now, your turf areas may run more frequently, and your established trees and shrub zone may not need to run at all. So if you're, for instance, going to put in an annual bed, something with flowers that's going to require a lot of water, you might want to consider putting that in an area that has a zone of irrigation that's going to run more frequently. Then also we talked about the low-lying areas, areas that may hold more water or areas that have more clay in the soil. Those are going to be the ones where you want to put the plants that do like more water.
Or areas may be under where your gutter runs out, and then during the rainy season you might have high water there.
Absolutely. Or you
Another-
get frequent water just from the runoff from the downspout. Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
just important to pay attention to that. I always like to watch what happens in my yard after a rain. And then you really can pay attention how quickly that water dissipates, or does it stand for a day or so.
Now, what about the size of the plant, the mature size? A lot of our landscapes are set for an instant landscape, and they're really planted too closely.
They really are, and also sometimes we fail to look up. It's very important. If you're planting a tree, recognize the size, the mature size of that tree, and recognize that a 30 or 40 foot spread, a 60-foot height, and you've planted it 10 foot away from your house, you may have a problem. So you always want to keep that eventual height and size in mind. Shrubs that, for instance, a viburnum can get to be a huge shrub, and elaeagnus can be huge. And if you're planting those 18 inches apart, you've got a problem coming because you're going to have too much too quickly.
Yes, and I have some viburnum that were planted 2 feet out from my house, as well as an elm tree that was planted about 2 feet out from my house. Is there any kind of distance from a building that you should consider in general, or is it you really have to look at each tree individually?
You do need to look at the size of each plant, but you always want to leave a good barrier around your foundation. You don't want to put any plants planted within 2 feet, even 3 feet of your foundation, because they're going to end up just blocking you when you need to go paint, or you need to walk around to do some maintenance or
Check
pest
for
control.
termites. Yeah.
Check for termites, right. So, and it actually doesn't show up, because if you view the house from eye level outside, you can't really tell how close those plants are planted. So it's a good idea to leave that barrier, that spacing.
Okay, what about variety of plants? Should we go for just a few different types of plants, or a hodgepodge of different things because we've got all these different conditions?
I personally prefer a diversity. I think nature is very diverse, and we're going to find that you attract a lot of beneficial insects. You're going to have more wildlife if you have a good diversity of plant material in your landscape. You also aren't putting all your eggs in one basket. I mean, what if you do venture out and select a plant that's not the most cold hardy, and then we have a December like we did last month? Suddenly you may have lost everything in your yard if you've invested totally in that one. Whereas if you do have a diversity, you're going to see there's a range of those that survive and thrive. So that's my
true.
personal recommendation.
Okay, any other recommendations?
Yes, we need to remember to avoid invasive exotic plants. It's very important. There's a lot of them in Central Florida that are air potato, Brazilian pepper, that are in our landscapes, and we need to make sure we get those removed, and that we avoid using them or letting them thrive. The other thing that's a great idea is to limit your turf areas. Turf is the biggest water lover in our landscapes, and it's also a big maintenance issue. It takes a lot of time and energy and money to maintain turf. Turf's a fancy word for grass.
Mowing,
Yes,
edging,
edging,
fertilizing,
blowing,
watering.
and pest control too.
Yes.
You're putting synthetic chemicals on the lawn that may reach the aquifer, and it's not necessarily the best idea. So if you can limit your turf areas to the areas you really need for that occasional soccer game or that barbecue outing, then you're going to find your landscape thrives more easily.
Well, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.